PIDE and industry collaboration, which I think is very important. The universities and the think tank sector must be collaborating with our universities and our government. We also are collaborating with our government. The point is that when we work as a team, the country develops. And therefore, this is a very important collaboration. We must first welcome our chief guest, Abdul Razak Daood, the Commerce Minister, who has taken out time to join us for the webinar, which is also extremely important to see ministers taking an interest in academic work. So Razak Daood Sahab, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I think all of the academic community does too. We also have a very good study done by PIDE for APTMA on energy prices and the textile industry and the export sector. I think it's an important study to think about. We live in a country where energy prices are an issue, primarily because we mismanaged the energy sector for a long time, not just today, but for the last, I think, 50, 60 years. Energy policies have been misguided, and therefore it's leading to a very high cost of energy. It'll take time to work itself out, but we must keep in mind that energy is a very important input, and that energy is something that we must be keeping an eye on, and we must try and make sure that our country is energy competitive. And therefore, keeping an eye on regional competitiveness on energy is going to be very important. So with that, let me first ask Razak Sahab to give a few comments, and I'll introduce the panel. And then, of course, I will try and, Razak Sahab, if you will also at the end try and sum up, that'll be very good. But for the moment, Razak Sahab, can I ask you to begin with your comments?
He doesn't seem to be online yet.
He's online. Okay, then we'll get him later. No problem. Okay, thank you. Well, then we've got a lovely panel. We've got the PIDE presentation, which we'll start with. Ahmed, Waqar, Qasim, who's the main lead author on the study, unfortunately will not be here because he's got COVID. We've got, instead, we've got Saddam Hussain, another economist from PIDE, who will present it, and Shaf, another economist from PIDE, who will present it. Then we've got three commentators actually from academia, because we thought it was important to get the rest of academia together. So we'll have Shahid Kardar, who, because of scheduling clashes, has got involved in another webinar, but he is going to take time off from there and come join us at 11:30 to give us his comments. And I will interrupt the session to include Shahid for about 5 minutes because he has to go back into a webinar in which he's speaking. Webinar is a great thing. I'm so glad we've discovered webinars. It is creating an academic thinking community in Pakistan, and PIDE has led the way, but now everybody is doing it. And this is very, very gratifying and very pleasing for us at PIDE. Then we've got Gohar Ejaz, of course. Gohar Ejaz is the Patron-in-Chief of APTMA. He's got many things to his credit, including real estate, including his philanthropic work in healthcare. Gohar is one of the leaders in industry, and I'm very pleased to welcome Gohar here. One of our enlightened young entrepreneurs who's leading the country. Inshallah, he will make a difference. From academia, we've got Khadija Bari from Institute of, from IBA Karachi, the well-known IBA in Karachi. We thought it was important to get Karachi on board. So Khadija Bari, a well-known professor of industry and industrial research in Karachi. So she will join us. Then we've got Aqdas Afzal from Habib University, another young economist, very bright and leading work in industrial economics. So we've got a complete learning event for you. So let's proceed with the
Razak Sahab is online.
Razak Sahab is online. Okay, Razak Sahab, I had welcomed you in your absence. I had acknowledged the fact that you were helping academia and the thinking sector in leading research. So we welcome you. We welcome you from the bottom of our hearts for joining this session. It's a very welcome thing. Would you please give us a few words before we start, and then we'll ask you after the session also to kind of sum up the session, or whatever you like from your side, from a policymaker side. Razak Sahab, welcome.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody, and Thank you for your organization to carry out this study. I have gone through the study that has been given to me, and there is no doubt that this is a very important subject and one that is being hotly debated in Islamabad. It is being debated because of there are many forces that are at work. We have surplus bijli, we are short of gas, and we want to shift in the opposite direction to which we were moving several years ago. Several years ago, there was a shortage of electricity. We moved to gas. Now the government is wanting to move the other way. And we have noticed in the last couple of years the difference that has happened if we get economically competitive energy prices. And now in the coming weeks, the government has to take a decision as to what should be the rate that this very important textile industry should get. So I am really looking forward to getting the views of everybody. I will be making notes. I will be asking some of the participants to come to Islamabad because we have to take a decision, and this webinar will help us help clear my mind and get us to understand exactly what we want to do and determine a way forward. So thank you to all of you, and I am more keen to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Razak Sahab. Mr. Minister, thank you very much. Very kind of you to chair the session. Let's begin with the presentation. Saddam Sahab, can you please begin with the presentation and present the study?
Thank you very much, sir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Let me first share my screen with you. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So this is a study done by PIDE and the APTMA together. It's regionally competitive energy tariffs and textile sector competitiveness. Basically, the government introduced competitive energy tariff for the zero-related sectors. And in this study, we want to analyze the impact on textile sector competitiveness. The textile sector has been suffering for past two decades due to the power shortage and the governance issues, etc. But recently, the textile sector has outperformed during the current pandemic and recorded a 7.9% growth in exports in January 2021. This can be partially be attributed to the regionally competitive energy tariff introduced by the governments in late 2018. So this is the scenario in which we will be analyzing the impact of this the policy tool. So we will let you know about the details in coming slides. So to give you a brief overview of the sector, like how significant it is for the Pakistani economy, the textile sector contributes around 8.5% of the GDP, and it also contributes around 60% of exports earning. Out of the total labor force of the country, it currently contributes the 40% of labor force are employed in this sector, which is equivalent to the 19 million workers. And among the manufacturing sector, the pie, it takes around 46% of the pie from the manufacturing sector. And in the value addition chain, it makes up to the 29%. And directly and indirectly, 25 million individuals are linked to this sector. The livelihood of 25 million individuals is linked with this sector. So there's no doubt it is very significant for the Pakistani economy and for the people of the country. So to start with, those who don't know what is RCTE, RCET is regionally competitive energy tariff, introduced by the government of Pakistan to the zero-rated sectors of the country to enhance its competitiveness regionally. Rlng is in this the policy, the government introduced the gas tariff Rlng at the rate of $6.5 per MMBTU since October 2018. A few months later, the government also introduced electricity tariffs at 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour since January 2019. However, recently, the government revised the rates from 7.5 cents to the 9 cents in September 2020. What was the objective? The objective was to offer energy tariffs at par with the regional peers to make the industry regionally competitive so that it can compete regionally and grow our exports. So the focus of this study, we took the data, the secondary data from the online sources and the annual reports of the companies. In this 50 listed textile companies of Pakistan are there 10 listed companies of India and 10 similar in the case of the Bangladesh. But still, we thought that something is missing. For that, we organized field trips, and our team, PIDE, Shafni, and Waqar, we went to the field, and we visited a number of spinning units and weaving units and processing. The numbers are visible on the screen. And we also did structured interviews with the chief technical officers of the units, and also some in-depth interviews with the senior management and experts. So this was the focus. And the data we got from the secondary sources and primary sources, we analyzed that through different economic modeling and statistical techniques. What were the results we will be sharing with you in a few. Shaf will be presenting the next slides. Shaf.
Okay, so basically this over here you can see the regional comparison of electricity tariffs as to how after the introduction of the regionally competitive energy tariff, Pakistan compares with other textile players in the region. If we can clearly see that Vietnam and India are at a much better level than us, where Vietnam is getting at 7.3 cents per kilowatt hour electricity tariff, while India, where states have their own right, where each state can set a certain electricity tariff, but we have example of two major states, Punjab and Maharashtra, where they have 7.1 and 7.8 cents per kilowatt hour respectively. So these two countries are clearly, even at this tariff, in a much better condition than Pakistan. The other two countries that we analyzed were Bangladesh and China. So we'll go one by one for them. For Bangladesh, we can see that even Bangladesh is getting 9 cents per kilowatt hour, which on paper seems that it is equal to what Pakistan is getting. However, there is one major difference, and that difference is that Bangladesh focuses and specializes only in the value added sector, or only in the, you could say, the downstream industry. And what does that do? That actually means that their energy component in energy share in the cost of conversion is much less, because the upstream industry uses a lot more energy share, whereas the downstream industry needs lesser energy share as compared to the upstream industry. So Bangladesh, despite a similar or an equal electricity tariff, is at an advantage as compared to Pakistan, because they focus only on the value added sectors, whereas Pakistan's textile sector focuses not just on the downstream industry, but a lot of upstream industry is also located in Pakistan. So this 9 cents per kilowatt hour actually does not bring us at par with Bangladesh as much as it should. On the other hand, if we look at China, so we have one Xinjiang province, which is one of their major industrial hubs, where they get industries getting 6.1 cents per kilowatt hour. But even if we see the general rate, which happens to be 9.8 cents per kilowatt hour, and someone might claim that, okay, we are maybe getting better than China, and China has been producing so much and they're capturing the market all over the world. But China's, you could say, system is completely different. And that is because they have such large production units and production capacities that they have achieved those economies of scale, where they can actually, their per unit cost ends up being very less, despite a slightly higher electricity tariff. They are getting 9.8 cents per kilowatt hour. So even with this regionally competitive electricity tariff, we are still, our industry is getting a little higher an electricity tariff as compared to the other major regional players. And now on the next slide, we'll have a look at the regional gas, how we compare with the different players in the gas tariff. Next slide, Saddam, please. Right. So this is the comparison of gas and Rlng. In Vietnam, basically the government decides which project gets what rate. So that was not comparable. But if we see in Bangladesh and India, they're getting $4.05 per MMBTU in Bangladesh, whereas India's maximum price cap is $4.06 per MMBTU. Now in India, as was the case in the electricity tariff, the gas tariff is again the states have the power where they can decide as to what rate they want to charge. However, the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas in India, they basically put a maximum price cap in for the gas rates, which has been decided as 4.06 cents, $4.06 per MMBTU. So the states could give a price lesser than this, but not higher than this. And even if we assume that okay, that all the states in India are actually giving a gas rate at the maximum price cap, even then in comparison with Pakistan's rate, if we see the rate that Punjab and KPK are getting, which is $6.5 per MMBTU, that happens to be a 2.5, almost $2.5 per MMBTU difference. Whereas even in same way, the gas rate is lower at $5.9 per MMBTU. Our industry is getting the gas at nearly $2 per MMBTU more than what industries in India and Bangladesh are getting. Right, next slide. So this is basically a cross-country comparison of the conversion cost, right? What is conversion cost? Conversion cost is basically if we take out the cost of raw material from the total cost of production, the remaining cost happens to be the conversion cost, or in simpler words, the cost that an industry incurs while in order to convert raw material into the next product, right? So if we see the average value for power and fuel, we can see from 2017 to 2020, Pakistani industry had 35.6% share of power and fuel in their conversion cost, whereas India had it at 29.8, while Bangladesh had 25.5, which actually comes, you could say, which actually seconds what our data had been showing in these previous two slides, where India has a considerably lower energy tariff, whereas Bangladesh, which not only benefits from lower energy tariff, but also it benefits from specializing just only in the value-added textile, where the energy component happens to be much less. So Pakistani industry at this moment is paying a much higher share in their conversion cost for power and fuel as compared to the other regional based industry. And still, as we can see on the next slide, Saddam, please, Pakistan's sector has contributed towards the export. This is a comparison from July 2017 up till December 2020, quarter-wise comparison of how our exports have done. So the two red arrows that you can see on the screen, they indicate the quarters where the initial electricity energy tariffs were given. First, the gas in September and October 2018, and then in January 2019, the electricity tariff. So basically, we can see very evidently that after that, there has been an upward trend in the exports of the value-added textiles. So that tariff has actually helped us push our exports of value-added textiles upwards. And the only you could see the downfall that we could see in those exports was during the fourth quarter of the financial year 2020, which was basically April, May, and June, which was basically the period of the COVID. But even after that, we can see a sharp upward incline in our exports, where we have benefited from the regionally competitive tariff, as well as from we have taken the early mover advantage for this industry as well. So you have managed to capture the market right now because of two major reasons. That is this competitive tariff that was given to the industry, and also the early mover advantage. But we have to make sure that we sustain this advantage that we have right now. We do not want to lose this market once the rest of the world opens up. And for that, we have we have actually analyzed few portions that as to how changes in energy tariffs will actually impact the working of this industry. And Saddam will now show those few key findings of those analysis to you.
Jishab, thank you. So the key findings of this study show that the average share of power and energy cost observe a 4 percentage point drop after the implementation of Rcte, and stand at 32% of the conversion cost. At the aggregate level, the total sales revenue and export sales revenue increased by 14%, while local sale revenues increased by 19%. And there are other findings as well. But let me share with you the three key findings here. And the three key findings here, the first one is a 10% increase in the energy tariff causes a 1.1% decrease in investment. So there's a elasticity of minus 0.11, which means that the average capital employed is around 2.8 billion in the listed textile unit. Moreover, the analysis also indicates that around 75% of textile units take new investment initiatives when energy tariff decreases. Therefore, out of 571 textile units in Pakistan, it is expected that 387 will venture on some sort of new investment initiatives. The sector at the aggregate will observe a minimum surge of around 388 billion in new investment due to Rcte. So this is a very significant result. Second is, in the first also remarkably, the State Bank of Pakistan announced a new policy, the Temporary Economic Relief Facility, TERF, and the State Bank declares that around 60% of the applications came from textile sector alone. Moreover, the textile sector has also experienced approximately $1.60 billion investment during the first half of the current fiscal year. So this kind of reinforces our result. Second is a 10% increase in energy tariff makes a firm layoff 62 employees, which means that since the number of textile units is around 521 in our country, therefore, a 10% energy tariff increment will bring a loss of 32,302 employment opportunities. Our data also indicate that the average textile unit provide employment opportunities for around 2,303 individuals. So consequently, if we translate these number into number of units for the purpose of simplification, so a 10% increase in the tariff will bring the 14 textile units and the brink of closing operations. So this is very significant. Third is we did the simulation exercises that if we remove the competitive energy tariff Rcte, so what will happen? Will we remain competitive or not in the region? So any change in tariff policy will translate through two channels. One is the direct impact and one is indirect impact. The direct impact is due to the extra the cost of energy which will be incurred during the process of production, and indirect impact will be through the upstream industries. The rise in input costs in the value chain will translate into the higher cost. So we did simulation exercises on the few products which we made, and I'll share a few here. For example, yarn. And you can see that there's Pakistan, China, India, and Bangladesh. So let me just, yeah. Now the cost of yarn, which is per dollar a pound, is 1.43, and India is at 1.30, and the Bangladesh is at 1.38. So if we remove the Rcte, we will see that we are not competitive enough in the region. Similar is the case of the second product, because there's a direct impact of 0.08 if we remove the Rcte. So it is quite obvious from the table, and you can see the next table, that we will not be regionally competitive energy. And one or two products we might be our competitive may not be lowest, but we will surely lose the price ranking in the world. Yes, and next is for sharp DLTL.
Okay, so basically right now there is an alternative proposal being presented, and that is to replace this regionally competitive energy tariff and introduce a DLTL scheme. A DLTL scheme is basically an export rebate for the exporters in the textile industry, and we try to analyze that in comparison with the regionally competitive energy tariff. And our study concludes that replacing the regionally competitive energy tariff policy with the DLTL scheme is actually not a rational option. And why is that so? One major issue with that is that it increases the transactions cost present in this. And one way of increasing that transaction cost is through time cost. For instance, the export industry will not be immediately getting those export rebates. Instead, they will have a higher cost of production. They'll have higher prices, for which they'll have to find a market. And instead, and and to claim those DLTL, they will have to file various documents with the government agencies and then wait for the government agencies to release those real payments to them. As of now, the government has not paid the export rebates from 2014 to different industries in Pakistan. So basically, since the last 6.5 years, the industrialists in Pakistan, the exporters in Pakistan are waiting on their payments. So there are these time costs attached. And even prior to that, there was a gap of over 15 years where those you could say export rebates were not paid, which were cleared up till 2014 only very recently. So this system is not 100% efficient. Even I think it's not even majorly efficient. There is a great issue of inefficiency within the scheme. Secondly, even if we make this, even if we happen to make this system efficient, there are documentation costs involved, and those documentation costs are not limited to just the industry but also to the government, because when the industry has to file those documents where as per which they have to claim those DLTL, they have to keep those they have to make those documents, maintain those documents, and the government also has to keep a record of those documents. So the entire documentation cost also increases, which actually makes this entire process not viable for the industry. Secondly, even if we were to remove all these issues, there is one major issue that we analyze that has been ignored by introducing or trying to introduce the scheme, and that is the lack of vertical integration within the industry. So as there is absolutely minimal vertical integration present in the industry, and as per some rough estimates, the vertical integration is less than even 10% of the entire industry. So basically our upstream industries exist separately, whereas our downstream industries exist separately, and there isn't much integration between those. So when we do introduce this DLTL scheme, we will be only benefiting the downstream industry, the value added sector, which will be able to claim those rebates. The upstream industry, like the spinning industry, the weaving industry, they won't be able to claim those because they won't be exporting anything. And what will that do? That will actually make their prices go up. They'll actually increase the raw material cost, and hence our downstream industry will be forced to actually not buy the raw material from the domestic industry. Instead, they will have to import the raw material. As a result, our import bill will increase, and also our upstream industries local sales will fall down. They won't be able to export, and hence we will, by introducing this DLTL scheme, in a very short time be forcing our upstream industry to suffer, and eventually even you could say shut down, as was the case only a few years ago. So I think our study actually concludes that this DLTL scheme brings more you could say cost attached to it than any benefits, and the government must continue with the regionally competitive energy tariff policy. But there are also other issues that are connected with these with the industry, and Saddam will share a few of these with you right now.
And then there are the challenges at the policy front. As you can see in the flow chart, there's consistency, inclusiveness, no feedback mechanism, and you can see it here. When we visited the industry, when we were conducting this study in Islamabad, we were happy that the government is providing them with the competitive energy tariff and everything is good and it will enhance the competitiveness of the energy. But when we visited the field, we came to know that even the energy supply and transmission issues. For example, there's the energy is not getting, there are interruptions in energy and fluctuations. Even 1 minute of energy fluctuation, which the government calls for, like in the maintenance, in the backdrop of maintenance, 1 minute energy shutdown causes the production loss of 15 to 20%. And this is a big production loss. And that there are sophisticated machines these days in the industry. For example, the machines, the fluctuations, they sometimes fuse the gadgets of the machinery, and those gadgets are not locally made, and they have to be imported. So the time spent in importing, and at that still the gadget is imported and fixed in the machinery.
Saddam sir, let me get in Shahid Gardar since he has to go away. Shahid Gardar, quickly over to you. I know.
Very kind. My sincerest apologies to everyone. Unfortunately, I'm already on a webinar and there's a prior commitment. But I'd like to quickly.
Shahid, thank you for taking time.
Okay. Very quickly, let me first compliment the young team. We had originally, I and Dr. Pasha had originally seen the first draft, and we had commented on it. We found the work which had been done original in many ways in terms of the quality of data that had been collected, which we hadn't seen recently. We also commented, and I'm sure Waqar and his team have actually incorporated it. This shows this suggestion in terms of substitution of potential substitution of inputs and factors of production. And I know they must have been weaved into this. And we talked about the production function as well as the profit function. Now, other than that, I mean, in support of what these young friends of ours have done, I and Dr. Pasha did a quick and dirty exercise looking at the impact of rise in energy tariffs on exports, the textiles and wearing apparel sector, looking at the CMI. I know the CMI is dated 2005-06, but we very quickly developed the index. And it's very interesting to share the results of what we did, because they reinforce some of the the conclusions and the recommendations and the estimates made by Waqar and Co, because I'm sure those are much more current than ours. Now, when we looked at the CMI of 2005-06, and given the value of production, let's assume was 100, because you can't really change prices globally of your own product, the gross profit percentage was about 30%, looking at the CMI at that time. The input cost of electricity and fuel was 7.5% of this value. So when we built the index, taking 2005-06 as the base, the electricity tariff using a base of 100, by 2019-20 had risen to 360, and unit value, index value of exports had actually risen from say, the 100, which was the base, to 224.4. Now, when we look at these trends, this is well before what is being discussed right now as to what the impact would be of energy prices. So the share of electricity and fuel costs actually increased to 12%. That meant the gross profit margin actually declined from 30 to 25.5, a decline of 4.5 percentage points. So it is interesting, which is really in support of what Waqar and team have done. And then what we did was that, okay, now this was the position in 2019-20. If we were to increase prices by say 25%, we don't know what it is likely to be for the industrial sector. But from what we can see, it is going to be substantial, just reading things in newspapers. If we make a 25% increase in fuel prices, input cost of share of electricity and fuel actually goes up to 15 percentage points from 12. So the gross profit margin comes down by 3 percentage points, which is really from 25.5 to 22.5. And so there is, because of tariffs, the gross profit margin actually reduces by 12%. So this, just to ignore what electricity will do to profit margins, because frankly, what you can't change is the global value of the product that you're selling. So I'll just stop any questions very quick, because I have to move on.
Quickly, anything for Shahid Kardar before we let him go? If there is, please speak up now. Otherwise, I think I'll have to let Shahid Kardar go. He's already in another webinar.
Thank you, and well done, Waqar and Co.
We will, inshallah, take it up with you again. Okay, thanks, Shahid. Thanks for coming. All the best, and thanks for Hafiz Pasha too. Hafiz Pasha and Shahid are always good collaborators with PIDE. Go ahead, Ji Shaf Saab, finish up.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so I was talking about the challenges that the policy. Sure. So I was talking about the challenges at the policy front. They are on the screen. But one thing that the industry keep hammering is that they need consistency and consistency. So because this also translates into the investment जो pattern होता है उनका. So if there's a policy for 1 year or 3 years, the investment decision of the industry will be according. But if there's a policy for 5 to 10 years or 15 years or more or less, at least it should be predictable. So will be the investment pattern of the industry. which will have the more bigger the time frame, the more the good will be the investment decision by the industry, and more the positive spill over effects of those investments. Secondly, there is no feedback mechanism as such in the policy making for the industry. For example, when we visited the industry, there were within the textile industry, there were different needs and requirements of, for example, spinning units and weaving units were different. The factors, the dynamic of the finished products were different. So the energy mix were different. So all have different requirements. So when you sit together with them, they will tell you what they need. So each sector within the textile industry have different requirements, and there's a high compliance cost and implementation issues. So policy is a tool to reduce uncertainty so that there's a level playing field. But unfortunately, in Pakistan, the uncertainty looms over again and again. So next is the challenges at the energy front. The swindling energy tariffs and transmission and supply issues. As I already told you that, okay, there's a competitive energy tariff which might enhance the competitive of the industry, but there are transmission and supply issues. For example, there fluctuations in energy, and 1 minute fluctuation in industry and the energy shutdowns the machinery for 20-25 minutes. It takes 20-25 minutes to restart the machinery. In some sophisticated machinery, it takes up to at least 1 hour, which causes the loss of 15 to 20% of the production. And second is gas Rlng shortage, as it is bought by the government, and there's uncertainty like how much gas and Rlng industry will be at the receiving end. So there's a extra maintenance cost due to transmission and supply energy. Because of this, most of the units are compelled to have their own captive generation units of power, which runs on the coal, etc. And then coal again, there's the low quality coal we have to import, and the industry also said that we should incentivize our the indigenous coal and to refine it so that we can use that as a cheap raw material. And then the last one is raw material challenges. There's a drop in the production of the cotton, drop in the quality. We see that the cotton is a kharif crop, and we have 3 other major kharif crops: rice, maize, and sugarcane. So we see that over the past few years, the cultivation area and the yield of rice, maize, and sugarcane has increased, and that of the cotton has decreased by 18 percentage points. This is because of the absence of R&D, because the cotton is a sophisticated crop and it is also prone to insecticide and pesticides, insects and pests. And insecticide and pesticide management is a bit expensive for a small farmer. So the government should really incentivize and invest into R&D, so to provide the farmers with the better seed quality, which is also a resistance to the pests and insects. And there are malpractice issues. For example, the contamination of the cotton internationally is 2 to 3%, and in Pakistan is it 8 to 10%. And there are some other issues like, they put the moisture and the plastic, etc., to increase the weight of the cotton and increase their profits. So all these issues need the government support so that they can have a cheap raw material at hand, and hence increase further the competitiveness of the industry. So the conclusion of this study is, among all the factors that make the textile sector of Pakistan regionally uncompetitive, the energy tariff is at the core, since it makes up to around 35 to 40% of the conversion cost. Therefore, it is pertinent to ensure that availability of energy at regionally competitive tariff. This study also finds convincing evidence that electricity tariff about 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour competitive, particularly within the region. Therefore, the calls for reverting it to 7.5 cents per kilowatt hour of energy, along with this $6.5 per MMBTU for the gas Rlng is not without the legitimate grounds. So this is the conclusion. This was all from our side. Now we will listen to the expert opinion and the comments from the panel. Ji, sir, thank you.
Thank you very much, Saddam.
Thank you, sir.
So before I go to discussants, I would also like to recognize that Mr. Sartaj Aziz, former Federal Finance Minister, Chairman Planning, and many other credits to his career. Sartaj sir, would you like to say a few words before we go to the discussants, or would you like to wait till after the discussants? Sartaj, are you there?
Sartaj, kindly sir, apne aap ko
Yeah.
unmute kar.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
We can hear.
I'd like to hear some more. It's an interesting presentation. So let's have some comments and I'll speak at the end.
ठीक है जी. अच्छा जी. So let me go first to Aqdas Afzal from Habib University. Aqdas, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir, for the chance to give a few comments. First of all, I'd like to say it's a very nicely done study. I'm especially pleased to see one of my students, Shaf. He was my student at NUST, finishing this study. So I'm very proud of this work. I'm not entirely sure about the conclusions put forth by this study. I find them somewhat tenuous, but I will get to that in just a few moments. I just wanted to ask a few questions. Number one, the entire case for giving a preferred or a competitive energy tariff at 7.5 cents per unit is based on the fact that the conversion cost, the proportion of energy in conversion cost is around 34-35%, which is very high compared to the neighboring countries, and that's what makes us uncompetitive. My question is, nowhere in the study is it mentioned what is the total amount of the conversion cost to raw material. So I would like to know what is that amount. I mean, is it 5%? Is it 10%? So that's my first question. And maybe Gohar Saab can answer that question once I'm done. So I think if it's 5 to 10% total conversion cost, which is labor plus energy input, then we are basically arguing or debating over a very small portion of the entire value chain where differences can be made. So that's one thing. Second, there is also a very big problem with the very low cost of labor or wages that are being given in Pakistan to labor. So if you look at one of the tables, and I had the pleasure of going through the entire study, I mean, there is a table where you can find out that in India, for instance, the wages are 80% higher than Pakistani wages. Okay, so if that's the case, then in a sense, because of these low wages, the sector is already getting an implicit subsidy. Okay, so I mean, that's something that we need to also think about, that, you know, we are not paying our labor as much. I know the kind of questions and comments that I will get in response, but I just wanted to highlight this as well. Finally, what I want to say is this. The most important conclusion that has been put forth, one of the most important conclusions. One conclusion is that if you give this competitive rate tariff, that will bring about this increase in jobs. And the second one was a 10% increase in investment. A 10% increase in the tariff brings about a 1.1% decrease in investment, something like. So there's a relationship, negative relationship between when the cost of energy goes up, investment goes down. So I looked at your econometric results and I looked at that table, and I'm afraid, I mean, they're on page 12 and 13, equation 2. And if you look at the appendix, I mean, the results are not statistically significant. I mean, the p-value is just off the charts. So I think, I don't know if that is a mistake or if that is something that you need to revisit, because given the p-value and the econometric results that you have presented, I'm addressing the young scholars who, mind you, have done a very good job. You cannot possibly make the conclusion that there is a negative relationship between the increase in energy tariff and a decrease in investment in the sector. So I think that's problematic. And my final point is this. When you talk about challenges and for the sector towards the end, I think that's a very, very good part of the study. I think you have done well. But there are, again, some issues. For example, you talk about that one of the reasons why we have not been, the textile sector has not been competitive in Pakistan has to do with this certain lack of corporate culture. I don't really understand what you mean by that. I mean, I think in order to do justice to something like this, we probably would have to look at the kind of incentives that operate when it comes to why the total amount of area that we use for cultivating cotton has been decreasing every year. And you point that out. So there are multiple reasons for that. I mean, is the reason basically a skewed distribution of agricultural land in this country? I mean, look at the work of Alice Amston in the case of Taiwan. You know, she makes the case that in order for, you know, agriculture sector to boom, you have to go through some kind of land reform, okay? Second problem is the lack of backward linkages. And you have, I mean, you have kind of touched on it, but I think that is a very, very important aspect of the whole problem. Problem being that our exports are not increasing the way we would like them to increase. And that has to do with the poor quality of seed that is available. Now, should we bring in Monsanto? Should we, you know, move towards getting pesticides that can deal effectively with ये जो कौन सा इनका आपका pest होता है? I think so गुलाबी सुंडी कहते हैं, bollworm, red bollworm or something like that. Should we move in that direction? So it's a very, very complex thing. And I think when you talk about challenges to the sector, you must talk about backward linkages. You know, what are some of the reasons why the total area under cultivation for cotton is decreasing? And it's very alarming the way this is happening. And final point is, you know, among the challenges for this sector, biggest challenges are two of them, you know, change of tastes when it comes to final consumers and a technological shock. So I'm sure some people here remember back in the day when people used to wear t-shirts when they used to go to gym, or, you know, cotton polos when they played golf or what have you, you know, took a stroll in a park. All of that is gone, you know, because of technological shift, because of changing customer preferences, people have moved towards synthetic fabrics and materials. And I think that is something you should also look at. I mean, for example, why is it that our textile sector is not competitive? I mean, how do we compare in terms of technology with India? So that are some of the comments that I have. I would be happy to assist with any portion of the study, especially with the econometric results. Thank you.
Thank you, Aqdas. Very good comments. Thank you very much. I take your point that absolutely much more research is needed in every area of Pakistan. This is something that we concluded in a webinar on central bank independence too. We are unfortunately a research-averse country, and the minister is here. I hope he hears us. We don't like research. Everything is done on the fly with PowerPoints in the cabinet room. Unfortunate, very unfortunate. We are the only country that runs like that. But let me go to our next discussant. Rabia Bibi, sorry.
Gohar Saab, sir.
Khadija, madam.
Khadija Bibi. Professor Khadija, would you like to please come in and say your piece now? Khadija Bibi. Khadija hai?
जी मैडम kindly unmute कर लें अपने आप को.
Assalamu alaikum ji, can you hear me?
We can hear you very well.
Okay, sir. I did go through the report in detail, and I believe that this competitive energy tariff policy is going to provide a temporary relief and a level playing field for the industry. However, my concern is much deeper. My concern is regarding the way the term competitiveness is being used by the in the industry and policy corridors. Increasing exports because of cheap labor, weak currency, or some sort of relief package or support from the government is not the sign of competitiveness. And I think we need to redress the term competitiveness. In my opinion, number one, a competitive sector is a sector that has shown some ability to move towards value-added products. And if we look at the product mix that this industry has been focusing over the years, there has been hardly any change or movement towards value-added There has been, but when we compare it vis-a-vis with our competitors, regional competitors, the rate has been very slow. My second point is that competitiveness is all about increasing productivity and efficiency, and that depends upon the skill base. The textile industry is stuck in the low skill, low competence trap. How many times has the industry contacted leading business schools to develop relevant marketing textile programs? Is it not worrisome that we do not have a single institute of national repute, let alone international repute, when it comes to a sector that has been providing 60% of our foreign exchange earnings to the economy for such a long time? My third point, sir, is that competitiveness of a sector depends upon its ability to develop mechanisms along the entire supply chain. Your report mentions very specifically that the contamination rate in the cotton is one of the highest in Pakistani cotton, around, I think, 6 to 8%. And it is much easier for the government to provide some sort of relief from the taxpayers' money, or for the industry to demand for relief, than to actually work on the mechanisms to bring an improvement in along the entire supply chain. So no effort, the entire focus is on relief package or some sort of a support, and the industry demanding it and the government providing it for short-term purposes. But to bring in the actual improvement in the supply chain is not the case. My fourth point, sir, is that competitiveness, whatever literature you pick up, competitiveness is all about innovation. Innovation in production processes, innovation in products. Yes, there are research institutions under the Ministry of Textiles and Agriculture working for R&D. But obviously the output that they have shown is much slow when we compare ourselves with regional competitors like India and China. And this is not something unique. If the research institutions are to work in isolation under the government umbrella, they will always be slow in terms of their output and their focus. It is the involvement of the stakeholders, the push that you get from the stakeholders, that gives right direction to R&D and the speed to R&D. So there has to be an involvement and desire on part of the stakeholders to push the industry, particularly the private sector, to push the industry, and the research institutions to bring out output that is at par with other regional competitors. In the end, I just want to point out that yes, this will provide some sort of a temporary relief, but if we are to judge the performance, there is urgent need to develop mechanisms to judge the performance of the textile sector whenever the more holistic policy that would actually judge the performance of the textile sector whenever these relief or packages or such policies are made for them. For example, just the performance variables involving increase in exports is not a sufficient ground to say that yes, this relief package has worked very well because our exports have increased. This is not a sufficient ground. We need to develop performance mechanisms that are based on quality of the product, on innovation, on product diversification, on market diversification. We have to find out the impact of the policies that we are making across all these dimensions, and not just increasing exports. Yes, you make the product cheaper one way or the other, the exports are going to increase, and this is not the sign of competitiveness. And I think that these are the elements that are generally not talked about or focused whenever we develop textile reports.
Thank you very much. Very good comments on competitiveness. I think we really need to think of competitiveness very carefully. Once again, a lot of conceptualization research is necessary. So I take your points very well. Good points. Can I bring in Mr. Gohar Ejaz now to talk about some of the issues? Gohar Ejaz, as I introduced, is one of our leading businessmen, also a philanthropist, has done a lot of good work in many areas, and Gohar is also very articulate and has been advising many governments. So Gohar Saab, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Saab. Thank you very much. I think it was a pleasure listening to the whole presentation being made by the scholars who are being termed as young scholars by Dr. Aqdas, and I had the opportunity to meet them and interact with them, and we have very good, mashallah, intellect developing. I also heard his comments and Khadija's comments. So I would just request Dr. Saab, if I am allowed 5 minutes, and I would request Dr. Aqdas and Khadija to please take the bias off your mind when you listen to me, because I am not going to give a counter argument. I am just going to present you a realistic situation of the whole scenario here. That is my humble submission.
Go ahead.
Number one, Dr. Aqdas pointed out that the total cost is 32% of the cost of production, and you would like to know what is its actual value to percentage. I believe you wanted to ask sales. You said raw material. I would say that I would link it with sales, because sales is a higher number to compare with compared to raw material, because raw material is 60% of my total product cost. So if 32% is, I'll just give you a number you would understand very clearly. If 60% is raw material, direct raw material, so this means we are left with 40%. And out of 40%, if 32% is energy, so I'm saying 14% of my, compared to raw material, is my cost of energy, number one. Number two, how we compare as industry, we take 2 points only. That what is, because after raw material, I have only 3 variables in my hand. Number one variable is energy, which is the highest. Number 2 variable is manpower. And number 3 variable is the cost of repayment of my equipment, which is called depreciation. And we term it as depreciation. And that is how the study very nicely has put in and is given 32, 32, and 10 for these 3 basic points. So I will compare it with the next point, which is more important, if you allow, that is, I'll compare it to sales. So if 60% is raw material and 40% is my total conversion cost, and on total conversion cost, if this is 32%, I'm talking about 12% of sales. So the total cost at 7.5 cents now, which is compared to India, Bangladesh, Vietnam, my cost is also 12% of sales. Textile business, if you would just go through, and I will present you after this meeting, and I'm sure this is also part of the slide, 10 top companies of the country, their last 10 years balance sheet. And if you look at the profitability of these 10 companies, which includes companies which have done innovation and has created huge footprint in domestic market. Gul Ahmed Textile has a sales of plus 80 billion rupees this year, which is one of the largest companies in the country. I'll take it as an example, which is $500 million company. Their domestic sales are about 40 billion, which is 50%. And their international sales are also 40 billion, which is about half of it. And if you take their profit, the last year profit was 3.2% of their sales. That was the net profit they earned. I would repeat, sir, is 3.2% of sales. That was their last year profit. And if I take last 10 years average, because I can't take 1 year, their total profit to sales, net profit to sales, is 5%. And there is no reason to hide this, the profitability also, because the textile industry has been given a status of final discharge of liability at a tax of 1% of sales, which actually becomes a tax rate of 20%. If the profitability is 5%, so it becomes 20%. And this year it was increased. Last year it was increased to 1.5%. So we also have the same corporate rate, which is 30% of our profit practically, but we are 1.5% of turnover. Even if I don't show that profit of 5, I have to pay that as minimum tax liability. So there is no reason for those companies also to hide any amount of profits. That is the point I'm trying to make. Number 2, now we use the word competitiveness. And I agree that competitiveness with Dr. Khadija is basically the innovation, the processes, the management, the equipment, research, the value. I 100% agree. But please understand that this is the country we are living in, all of us. Our total country, leave aside textile. What is the export of Pakistan, sir? Pakistan's total export is $25 billion. Where are these 220 million people innovating, value adding? This is what we stand for. We continue to say that our politicians do not deliver, but we fail to say that they come from amongst us. And that is who we go and vote for. Exactly the same case. Look at our exports. What is the reason? When I talk to this academia and this intellect, I expect that they would understand 100% of what I'm saying. What is the reason that Pakistan's exports are $25 billion? I just can't understand. And when I only gave one advice to the government when they were coming in manifesto, please keep our energy rate at 7.5 cents and $6.50. And I will share with you. Would you be surprised if I tell you that the total subsidy in maintaining gas at $6.50 for the government of Pakistan last year, which we are saying that taxpayers' money was zero? Can you imagine that? The total money paid in last 1 year to maintain the gas price of $6.5 is total zero. And with that price, $6.50, the cost of energy, which I produce in-house for my plant, is also 6.5 cents, which is totally in line with the region. Whereas those plants which are SMEs, which is the whole industry is not integrated. It is spinning, it is weaving, it is sizing, it is printing, processing. We have only 15% of our companies which are vertically integrated. So they have their own large gas power plants on which they get internationally priced gas at $6.50, where no subsidy was given. A lot of wastages, a lot of UFGs, everything of the country was put on it, and still the price was 6.5, and it costed us 6.5 cents. And I said that the SMEs should be given 7.5 cents. Why? Because that is the regional price. Now, when I say 7.5 cents and people say subsidy, you know what was the amount of subsidy given last year? Was 29 billion rupees. It was 29 billion rupees. This is the total amount it was capped at, which means if the total value of our exports last year was exactly $13.5 billion, it is 2 trillion rupees. On 2 trillion rupees, it is 1.4% of sales. That is what they gave us. The rest of the industry produced their own energy from their own captive. And this was the energy used by the SMEs, who, if we do not provide them energy at the regional price, the whole chain get disconnected. Because there are 300,000 looms in Gujranwala and Faisalabad. There are 200,000 small towel factories which are in small cities which use electricity as the base power station. If I disconnect them, the chain gets disconnected. It's going to corporatize, it's going to shift to the industry which can produce their own captive power. Now, what is power and what is subsidy? I would also like the academia to look at it. So last month, the NEPRA report, NEPRA gives an advertisement every month in the papers. What is their raw material cost? Like Dr. Sab said, I'm interested to know raw material cost. The raw material cost for electricity production by NEPRA last month, sir, in the month of February, which was printed only 2 weeks ago, was 4 rupee and 90 paisa. Sir, it works out to 3 cents. Now, on a 3 cents raw material base, what I'm saying is provide your industry 7.5 cents. Now, internationally, sir, I'm not talking about what the government has done in IPPs, what the government has done in their distributions. I'm not concerned about it. I'm saying if you want to export, please, you need to look at numbers, how it is calculated internationally, because I'm not ready to point out fingers on anyone. But if I do that, the total cost is 4 rupees 90 paise for the fuel cost, which includes hydro, which includes nuclear, which includes coal, which includes gas, which includes Rlng, which includes diesel also. And the total cost after that, internationally, if I have to have any power plant anywhere in the world, the total cost, including return on profit, is 2 cents. Just type the computer and you will find out you can get thousands of megawatt energy in your country with 2 cents conversion cost, which will include his profit, which will include his cost of maintenance, which will include his cost of repayment, everything in 2 cents. Probably Razak Sahab is charging 1.2 cents from his power plant to the government right now. Sapphire is charging probably 1.3 cents. Shahid Abdullah is online. I believe he can answer that. Sapphire is charging 1.3 cents. So 2 cents I'm taking for a new plant today. What does it mean, sir? 5 rupees plus 2 cents is 3 rupees, which means 8 rupees. Now, 8 rupees is the cost of power which is produced from a power plant. Now they give it to NTDC. NTDC calculates I have 2% line losses. And I want to charge another 2% of profit. Okay, charge it 4%. Now 4% on 8 rupees is only 32 paisa. Give them 50 paisa. Give them 1 rupee to the NTD system. So they even upgrade their lines. These are NTDCs are 132 kV lines, which take the electricity from the power plants to the grid station. So it's 9 rupees. Now, what is the next cost? From NTDC to Discos. Now, Disco says I have 10% line losses. In industry on 132 kV, they themselves claim that we have 98% recovery and 100% of energy is given to these stations at B3, B4 tariffs, which means they have only 2% losses on me. I'm ready to take 10% of the system loss. So I'm cross-subsidizing the domestic consumer, doesn't matter. Even if I take 10%, it becomes 10 rupees. Now they say, I want to make money also. Okay, you make money also. How much money the Disco wants to make? 10%. Okay, make it. It all comes up to 11 units. Now, if I say 7.5 cents, it is 12 rupees and 40 paisa, which means another 10% to the federal government for any of another subsidy. So I'm not asking for subsidies. What I'm saying is don't pass others' losses on me. This is all I'm saying. I continue to say that. I'm not asking for subsidy. I'm saying, please price me right in line with international market. Whatever you have messed up in 15 years in the Disco systems, in the IPP structures, all over invoice projects, please, you can't load exports. That's all I say. I don't ask for subsidy. So when I say that they say that the industry is asking for subsidy, I'm not. Second point, the industry today, even at 20 rupees, the government is saying, when I'm saying the total cost is 10 rupees, even at 20 rupees, they sell to domestic consumer, they are saying we're making a loss of 400 billion rupee annually. What does this mean? That they are out by another 6 rupees, which is what they want to increase the price to every consumer. They want to take it to 26 rupees. Now with costing 11 rupees, they want to sell it at 26 rupees and they are going to call it subsidy to an export-based industry. My only point is, we all need to see an international interest. Do we want to compete in the world? Or do we want to load this money which have been taken away, fleeced by people? And PTI came on the agenda that they would take this money out of their pockets and done it. But what has happened is they have not achieved anything. And result is the consumer. So I am not speaking on behalf of general consumer right now. I'm speaking on behalf of industry. Then when it is costing them 10 rupees, the international tariff is 6.3 cents. How can you say that you are going to export from our country, exports from our country with a cost of higher than the world price, a cost higher than the cost, which is actually calculated by anybody? I would invite you all, please calculate the cost of energy, what I've said. Please look at the NEPRA. Please look at the 2 cents I said for the conversion. Please look at the NTDC cost. Please look at the Disco margins. Please look at the profitability and say, I'm asking for anything wrong. I'm saying, please let go of me. I was at 2013, exports of $25 billion. 7 years, I'm still there. The first time in 2 years, industry came back and said, we want to invest. If you give us regional tariffs, we're not asking for subsidies. If the regional tariff is higher, charge me higher. There was gas price even at $3. The government was not able to lock in gas. I don't mind. The price which I am getting today Please do not put me into the system. This is all I'm saying. Now the government is saying two things. We are not going to let you produce energy. We ask the energy committee, why will you not let us produce energy? Said, no, we have got surplus energy now of 34,000 megawatts. In summers, we consume 24,000. In winters, we consume 8,000. We don't have a customer. Now we want to have your 3,000 megawatt to produce yourself without subsidy on our system so that we can charge you 300 billion rupees. I asked them that who will pay this 300 billion rupees? I can't export at 25 rupees. My cost, which I'm trying to show here is 35% of my cost of production is energy, is 12% of sales, or 14% of my raw material cost. Now, point of view is, if they charge me on sales double the value, my margin is 5%. How will I do business if they double my value of my energy from 12 to 24? The whole chain goes down. Like I said, 10% are only vertically integrated units. This is why the research doesn't go on. Because when you look at top 10 companies, there are no reserves. Everybody is going out of export business. Razak Daood Saab has brought them back to textiles. That every house where the textile 300 families were based in, all those houses were leaving textile. Razak Saab has held them back. Razak, today the buzzword is, we need to go and get back to textiles again. We need to set up industry again. This buzzword has not been there for the last 15 years. We were talking about just surviving another day. Look at the balance sheets from 2005 to 13. Everybody was bleeding. And what we are now doing is, in last 2 years, you know how much money we made? We only made 5%, but on $14 billion, 5% is what? $700-800 million. You have to let capital at least be formed in Pakistan for companies to grow. These are the companies will take Pakistan from 25 billion to $100 billion. You will be surprised to hear another number, sir. 220 million people. We talk about a $300 billion economy. You know what is the largest company in Pakistan with largest exports? Largest exporting company is $300 million. Not talking about textiles. Everything in the country, $300 million. You know, when I come to number 10, it comes down to $200 million. So when I go from number 10 to number 20, you know where it goes? It comes to $100 million. So number 20 number company is $100 million. When I come down to number 50, it comes to $50 million. So our 50th largest export company in the country, with so much bonanza, 30 billion rupees been given to them as to ensure energy. The largest bonanza of 60% people of this country export and other exports put together. Top 50 companies, when we come to 50 is $50 million. And when I come to number 100, you know what it is? It's $25 million. So number 100 company is $25 million. I say we need to add a zero with each company. The number 100 company should not be 25, should be 250. And what I'm asking is only regional tariffs. I'm not asking for any subsidies. I am not asking for anything from the government. If they can't allow me to produce my own energy, I'll produce my own energy. I'll buy my own gas. I'll pay their systems. Get me out of this. Now, minimum wages. I am the first person who went on TV and said that when the dollar was 100 rupees, minimum wage was 16,000, which means $160, which was in Nawaz Sharif's time, 2015. Then came Shahid Khaqan Abbasi's time. He maintained it at 16,000 and the currency was devalued to 125 rupees, which means what? $140. PTI came in, the currency devalued from 125 to 168. Now it is 155. They have increased the minimum wage from 16,000 to 17,500. At $168, it became $107. At 155 rupees, 17,500 rupees today becomes $118. I'm saying I'm the first person who's saying increase minimum wage by 20%. Because it should be $140 in line with my, and that is the way to control, give them money. The state cannot give them money. The state cannot give them money through Ehsas program. I am the first one. My whole industry stood against me. Then why are you saying? I said, no, I have to. मैंने अपनी जान अल्लाह को देनी. If I am going to represent, I am going to present the industry right. When I am saying energy at regional price, then I'm going to say even labor at regional price. Regional price is today 140. We are $20 because of this devaluation in last 2 years. It has become difficult for a common man. It has become difficult for labor to meet their ends. Although I would just request all of you to understand, we have increased our salaries even without this minimum wage increase. There are companies 30% who increased their salaries by 20% without the government notice of minimum wages. But I want 100%. Only it will happen when the government does it. My humble submission, sir, is today we are at a crossroad. Do we want to stay at $25 billion and our next generation would sit with you and still discuss that we are at $25 billion? Because Dr. Nadeem, I knew him when he was chairman planning. When he left, the exports were $25 billion. Razak Daood Sahab, I have known when he was the commerce minister. He left at $10 billion in 2005. Please do not leave this country to irrational policies. Where I know, Razak Sahab, that industry cannot be subsidized. There will be so many people. Let them produce their own energy. Please don't take them into the system because you can never be able to get 300 billion rupees for them. And we will not be able to compete. Please allow us not to come into the system. Please keep us out of the system. Even if you want us to come into the system, I would request give you another innovative solution. Give us a power plant which is costing you, 2 power plants, 3,000 megawatt is costing you a capacity payment. We are ready to take those plants and produce energy from them and distribute to ourselves and don't put us into the system. We are ready to help you. But please don't make Pakistan, when we use the word incompetitive, please, I would change my word. Please don't load us with the corruption of previous years because we cannot export the corruption of the previous rulers of Pakistan. If you want to be so candid, I will be candid. Thank you very much.
Very well put, Gohar Sahab. I think you're absolutely right. We have to have an export sector. We have to increase our exports. Our exports are roughly about less than 10% of our GDP, which is very, Malaysia, etc., are up to about 100%. All developing countries that grow are at huge multiples of GDP in terms of exports. So you're absolutely right. And yes, the problem is the policy table. Everything is so confused at the policy table that it loads a huge amount of uncertainty on everybody. So absolutely correct. I take your points very well. I take the whole discussion very well. But before I go on, let me quickly ask Razak Sahab, if Razak Sahab wants to say anything now, before I take comments from the floor. Razak Sahab?
Razak Sahab, sir, kindly apna aapko unmute kar lein, sir.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see me or you can't?
Unfortunately, we can't see you. I don't think your camera's on.
Oh, okay. Now can you see me?
Now we can see you. Now we can see you. Please go ahead.
Okay. I think whatever I've heard is absolutely it's very interesting for me. I have a few comments to make, and that is nobody in the government is saying that we should not give our industry, the export industry, competitive bijli prices and gas prices. That is, everyone is of the opinion that yes, they should be compensated, and not compensated, that they should get internationally competitive energy prices. That's not the issue. The issue that is before us is why should they're saying why should that production that goes to the domestic market, why should they get electricity at competitive prices? They want to give competitive prices to the export sector. So then the question comes, how do you skin the cat? I have been proposing that it is very difficult to differentiate, and it's obvious that the upstream people get hurt. The lower the garments, they will not get that much affected. I also agree with what has been said, is that very small, about 10%, some people say 11%, are integrated units. We are not a country that is that have a huge number of integrated units. Our units, very few are integrated, and so you have this particular problem. So what the government is saying is we want to compensate, but compensate through the DTL. Now, this webinar is also talking that the study is also showing that it's going to be very, very difficult to differentiate between what is local, what is the energy that goes directly into exports. So that is to me, that is the main bane of contention. Then the second point is, when you want to give the zero-rated industries, when you want to give them international competitive energy prices, what is the international competitive price? Now, this study is saying that you should make it 7.5 cents. I would like to take on what Dr. Afzal said, and Gohar Ejaz has also alluded to it, and that is, what is the energy cost? After hearing Gohar Ejaz, I don't like this concept of it is 32% of the conversion cost. I'm a believer, rather than looking at it that way, we should look at it at what is the energy as a percentage of the sales price. And Gohar Ejaz has given that it is around 12%, 14%. Obviously, it's higher upstream and lower in the garments. Now, if it is 12%, fine. What is the level of adjustment that we should make to make our people competitive? To me, the fact that we have in the last year substantially changed the scenario, and our exports are going well. I have been of the opinion, and this is what I'm saying, is let us, we don't want to give them extra benefit of a too lower energy, but the fact that we did give them competitive energy prices, you suddenly saw the upswing. And as the study shows, 60% of all the turf money, the funding from the state bank is now going into the textile sector. And I think this is a very, very good sign. In the long run, we want to bring the textile sector into a lower position. But at this moment, for the next 5 years, we are heavily dependent on textiles. And if we want our foreign exchange reserves to move up, it has to be by supporting the textile. I want to comment Dr. Khadija about the 4 points that she says. It's absolutely correct. Dr. Saiba, your viewpoints on innovation are correct. And this is something that we in the Ministry of Commerce are talking with the stakeholders, that how can we change the tariffs so that people are more prone for innovation and bringing out products that are what they now call the technical textile. And we're looking at ways and means of how do you bring down the duty structure to allow it. I will say that the government's recent moves in the last 2 years of bringing down the cost of raw materials and not looking at revenue is paying off. And I hope that in the coming budget, we will do more of that. Dr. Saiba, you mentioned about productivity. That I do agree, but whatever is said, I still feel all our industries, not just textiles, all our industries, as far as our productivity is concerned, it is low. What was it? I hope that after this webinar, we can sit down, come to some conclusions, and take this matter back to the government. We do have issues. We've got the issues of gas versus electricity. We've got issues of the level of the energy amount. I also do agree with Gohar Ejaz that unfortunately the government is inclined to talk of subsidy to industry. It is not a subsidy. We are actually, it is industry that is actually cross-subsidizing the domestic sector and the inefficiencies in the system. It is a point of concern to me that it is not a subsidy. So I'm happy at what I've heard. I think it will require a few more things to look at, and then we've got to be able to come to a final figure whether the government agrees on 7.5 cents or the government has to decide on what is the mechanism of compensation. Government is prepared to give the compensation. We're all on the same page. It's a question of how and at what level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Razak Saab. I think you made very good comments. Thank you. I think it's important to understand that.
Can I speak now?
Ji, Sartaj Saab, go ahead. Sartaj Saab, please go ahead.
I think a very useful seminar, and I compliment PIDE for doing such a useful study. And in the sense that it has highlighted many issues. I agree with the basic thrust of the webinar that in the short run, we have to depend on textile for our exports. And therefore, whatever incentives can be provided, whatever limitations can be removed, it is important to do so. And obviously, energy is an important factor in the cost of production. So I hope that this discussion will enable the government to take a policy posture which will help the textile industry to continue to expand its export. Secondly, I think this is the short run. In the medium run, we have, as already emphasized by everybody, we have to go to value added and better efficiency in the sector, because unless we do that, our total productivity and from the textile sector will remain low. So, and as already pointed out, even the energy, when you go up higher, proportion gets even lower. The third point I'd like to emphasize is that without increasing cotton production, the problem of textile industry cannot be really resolved. And it's a real pity that we are stuck even below 10 million bales, although we achieved 12 million bales way back in 1982-83. India has moved from 12 to almost 40, and we are still stuck at that. I remember in January 2018, I, as the chairman of a special committee, submitted a report on measures to increase cotton production, in which the basic point was that the world has moved on to PT cotton fourth generation, and we are stuck with the first generation. Even that is contaminated. Our own research is virtually stopped because APTMA stopped funding them. That was also inefficient. And similarly, these, but more importantly, unless the sugarcane policies revise the cotton production, the sugarcane area has increased by 27%, cotton has gone down by 20%. So these are the three additional points which I wanted to add to a very useful seminar, and I thank you for giving me the chance to participate.
Thank you very much, Sattaj Sahab. You're always a pleasure to listen to, and you're always succinct and clear. I think, quite frankly, the mess is a long time coming, and unfortunately, our policy has been haphazard and all over the place. I don't think Gohar Sahab corruption is as much a problem as incompetence and bad policy. Quite frankly, some of the policies that come about, starting from the FCD crisis to the SRO problem to the energy IPP issues, many researchers have been arguing against those, but they've been told they live in cloud cuckoo land and that the government knows best, and the government always acts alone. The government does not want to share information. The government does not want to talk and debate. Like the SPP law, for example, the government does not want to share the law. I don't understand why a law that has been approved by the cabinet is not shared. So we don't have a policy that is shared. We don't have a policy that is made in a coherent fashion or in a clear fashion. It is like the parable of the messy room or the messy house. When you keep messing up your house, don't maintain it, keep doing, fixing a leak here or fixing a leak there. And when the house falls, then you begin to cry. Then, oh my God. And then you say, okay, no, it doesn't matter. We'll try and assign the blame to somebody. So there it is. That's unfortunately the situation in this house. If we can clean up our policy making, we'll know something, but I don't see the signs of that yet. But let's hope, let's hope. So that's why we are talking about either it's energy or this or that. Ultimately, I think the government's job is neither to subsidize energy nor to fix raw materials. The government job is to give a level playing field to everybody. It's like a cricket field. The umpire's role is to fix the rules and not to get into the game. Here, unfortunately, the government gets into the game, but that's besides the point. I'll go to the floor. I'll take some questions. Ji, Noman Wazir Sahab. Noman Wazir Sahab, introduce kare apne aap ko aur bole, please.
Thank you, Dr. Saab, Dr. Nadeem Saab, and I'm Senator Noman Wazir. I was on the Senate for the last 6 years and been on the board of various discos on the Senate Committee on Power as well. So I'm quite current as far as the electricity is concerned. It was a very nice presentation by the academic presentation and a bright sprinkle by Gohar Ejaz Saab on the private sector views. I'm going to talk about electricity first, and I have my own 2 grids, one grid of 40 megawatts in Peshawar and an 80 megawatts grid in Lahore. So I know the electricity pretty well. My question is, I'm sure I know that Gohar Ejaz Saab is working on it. Why do you call subsidy? Why do you call electricity subsidy? This is not subsidy. This is the actual rate which should be given to us, excluding the line losses, which is for the domestic sector, other sectors are going through. Industries should not take the line loss. The best way out for it is, which I've been trying to say since the last 15 years, now that our government, PTI government is here, we started with this concept of wheeling of electricity. All exporters, including textiles, should have the permission to wheel electricity from one source to another. And let me tell you, how do you do it? The procedure is there, NEPRA's decision is there, everything is there. It has to be implemented only. Implementation is delayed, as the Senate Power Committee, a member of the Power Committee, is heading this another committee as well. First wheeling concept was achieved from Pakistan Ordnance Factory Waqar about 3 years back. Now in KPK, we have electricity from Malakand 3 and Pehur through the wheeling concept. And how much do we get that electricity for? From Pehur, we were getting at 0.5 cents a kilowatt hour a unit. Now we are getting at 5 cents. What I'm to tell all of you is, and if Daood Sahab is also listening to it, all export sectors should be permitted to wheel electricity to their premises, buying from any power source, wherever they want to buy it, whether it's public sector or a private sector. That is the way out. There's no subsidy involved. You wheel it from power source, you pay, the NEPRA gives a decision that how much you pay for the user charges to NTTC or to the DISCO. That is the way out of getting a reduced rate of tariff from the for your production, and naturally low rate you get better exports and also import substitution, which during this discussion we are missing on to. Another point highlighted was electrical machines. Now, I know the private sector industries all over Pakistan, I keep meeting them. How many of them have 5-star equipment on there? They have the most inefficient electrical equipment. Power factor should be 0.9, it is 0.7, 0.8. They don't put up their capacitors. They don't have transformers, which are having higher copper and iron losses. As someone pointed out in this discussion, the efficient equipment 5-star rating has to be decided. PSQCA is the implementer, and they should go ahead and start doing this implementation. Thirdly, what normally in such analysis, I can tell you we did in KPK, we did for the mineral sector, is a value chain analysis. We did it for the marble sector about 12, 13 years back with the help of World Bank. And we concluded that where the problem was, and we identified that in the marble sector, it was blasting and not square block cutting, which we started after that, we started there. What you have to do is the academia should do a value chain analysis of the textile sector or any other sector, which is missing in Pakistan. In all sectors, academia has to do a value chain analysis, benchmark it against any international organization, the leaders of that particular sector, and identify where your costs are increasing, where your expenses are more. So that is which needs to be done, and which is missing at this moment. And another very important thing is all these inputs that we are giving, lower subsidy or for export sector that we are giving in. These are inputs. You must determine what are the outputs and what are the outcomes. No government department ever evaluates that with this input, what outputs you are getting and what outcomes you're giving. With identified milestone and tangible indicators, all of these things are missing. Till the time you don't have that thing, you cannot move ahead. And you talked about DLTL. Well, if you want to have DLTL, why textile? If you don't like it in textile sector, all export sectors would not like that as well. So we have to come up with the mechanism, as I told you about the wheeling concept. If we come up with that concept all across Pakistan for export sectors, as well import substitution. We miss on this point. We forget import substitution. So import substitution is also to be given energy at a cost through a process which is available, the laws are available, and that is how it should be done. And finally, minimum wages. I totally agree with Ejaz Saab. In the Senate, I've been pointing it out that the minimum wages of 17,000 is nothing. We should minimum have minimum wages. It should be 23,000, and the provincial minimum wage board should also be made effective. So these are my views about textile and general industry. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you
Nadeem.
very much, Wazir Saab. Thank you very much. It's nice to hear a senator or an ex-senator in such a discussion. Wonderful. Is Rcte Saab? If you want to raise your hand now, raise it now. Don't come in later.
So I just wanted to say that to provide a level playing field, the government has to consider the problem holistically. So Gohar Saab says that don't pass on the inefficiencies of the energy sector to the textile sector, and don't pass on the mistakes of the past rulers to the energy sector. So the problem for the government is that to whom should these inefficiencies be passed on? To the rest of the society minus the textile sector? This is my question.
Good point, good point. Ji, Tanveer Saab, Tanveer Hussain Saab.
Assalamu alaikum. I would like to make 3-4 points. The first of all,
Tanveer Saab.
My name is Dr. Tanveer Hussain. I'm rector of National Textile University, Islamabad. And the first point is that the government should enable and facilitate industry to produce their own energy from renewable resources. The emphasis is on renewable resources because that is going to be the future in terms of sustainable development goals of the UN, as well as the demands from the international brands. Number two, lest we lose our raw material advantage, there's need to work on war footing to increase the production of cotton, especially the sustainable cotton. The point number 3 is that we should also explore other sustainable natural fibers, for example, hemp. Lately, there has been a lot of demand for sustainable raw materials all over the world, and we have a huge capacity which is untapped to produce fibers from hemp or banana waste, etc. And for industry, I have 2 points. First of all, it is one thing to get cheap energy, and it is another to use that energy efficiently. I think every industry should introduce two metrics within their mill if they have not introduced already. Number one, value added per unit of the energy consumed. And number two, what is the unit consumption per kg of yarn production? So in that way, we will also be measuring the energy efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanveer Saab. Bahut shukriya. Acha ji, I'll go back to the panel now. If anybody wants to raise some final points, feel free to do so. Ji, anyone? People from the PID, Aqdas Saab, Khadija, Gohar Saab, anybody? Ek second, ji, let me first get, I think Bashir Saab bol rahe hain. Bashir Saab, is that you? Bashir Saab, Bashir Ali Mohammed Saab, hai? Kaun se Bashir Saab hai? Bataiye. Bashir Saab boliye. Bashir Saab?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Ji, please speak. Unmute yourself, Ji. I think you muted yourself. Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, Bashir Saab.
Is it okay?
Ah, that's better. Ji, boliye.
All right. Thank you. No, I feel that everybody has done a lot of research, a lot of work, and I thank all of you. I think for taking so much interest. This is a burning issue at the moment. Razak Saab is dealing with it, and he's got pressures daily from all the industry because they really don't have a clear picture, and there's no consistency and clarity of government policy, which is one of the most important things for industry and exports. And for our customers, because when these things are coming in the press, our customers are saying, will you be able to get gas? Will you be able to run? Can we give you future orders? So it is actually giving a really wrong message to the whole world, because there are people here, agents here of customers who are giving them this information that there are a lot of problems ahead in the country. I think we should first sit down and make up our mind what we really want to do. On a lot of things, I think there are issues which a lot of people don't really understand because they're looking at just at the top of the problems. They haven't gone down. First, the indirect industry, like even though I'm an integrated mill, 25% of my fabric and yarn is going to the SMEs who are exporting. So, it's shown as a local sale, but actually I can guarantee the government through the banks that this is going to factories which are total 100% exporters. They are not selling in the domestic market at all. So, this is a very complicated issue to sort of link it to DLTL or anything. All the indirect exporters, the spinning mills, the weaving mills are selling. And if the government really does a proper study, they'll find out that 80% of the raw material in the indirect is going for exports, and it's not being sold domestically. I'm the largest retailer in the country, so I know the domestic sale. I'm the largest taxpayer. So domestic sale is actually paying a lot of taxes also, which the government should realize. And on the retail side, and though my retail, it shows that I'm selling 50%, I'm not. I'm just selling 20% of my total thing on the domestic market. The rest is all going to exports, directly or direct exports or indirect exports. The other thing on the minimum wages, we are paying over 24,000 rupees. We can't get skilled labor. It's just not possible. After training, our people go away. So it's just, this is a wrong impression that people are, nobody wants to work at 20,000 rupees. Forget about 17,000. Yes, in the unorganized sector, that is it. Now, even if you increase the rates, the unorganized sector is not going to pay because it's another world. It's an undocumented sector. So the documented sector doesn't mind. They are paying anyway. And we are paying. So, and we can't get the skills. And that is a major problem. We become training schools or universities. Our people are just going away. And we are just training and training and training. But we don't mind it. This is the price we all have learned to pay. So I feel that the government should, in the short term, like Razak Saab said, next 5 years, not tinker with this, let it run. It's, as Gohar Saab said very correctly, it's such a small amount and we're making such a big thing about it. It's just... I think we've got so much talent in the country. We can sit down and come up with medium-term and long-term solutions, and we know what the solutions are. So I just feel that we should just quickly, Razak Saab should get together a few people as quickly as possible, and then, be able to present the case to the government in such a strong manner that the government should understand that this is not a big deal at all. I mean, we made this into something very big. It is a very, very small thing. Amounts are very small, and the indirect benefits are so huge that we should just not look at it. So I feel that exports are very important and reserves are very important. We don't want to continue this IMF program. I think we need to get out and make our own growth policies. So we need to build our reserves very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bashir Ali Mohammed Saab. Bashir Ali Mohammed Saab, one of our largest industrialists. Thank you. Can I ask Shahid Abdullah Saab to take the floor too for a little while since he's here, or is he gone? Shahid Abdullah Saab? He's also a very large industrialist. I think he's gone. Okay, ji. If not, then Hamid Zaman Saab, the founder of Bari, good entrepreneur, lovely enterprise. Hamid Zaman Saab, boliye.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum ji. Thank you very much. This is a very informative webinar. बहुत सारी चीजें बहुत खुल के डिस्कस हो रही हैं. There's one point I would like to make. ये बहुत एक डिस्कशन हो रही है कि exports are very important and उनको सब्सिडी मिलनी चाहिए, और हुकूमत को एक बहुत इशू है कि जब ये टेक्सटाइल इंडस्ट्री को देते हैं सब्सिडीज, तो दे डू नॉट वांट दैट. सब्सिडी तो खैर कहना ही नहीं चाहिए. अगर उनको कंपेटिटिव रेट्स देते हैं तो दोज रेट्स शुड नॉट गो टू द डोमेस्टिक sector, because we require exports. But I would just like to make a point here. I started from the domestic industry. I'm perhaps, in terms of points of sale, the largest retailer in the country. And in my manufacturing side, which is another company, I'm also in the top 100 exporters. लेकिन मैं आपको एक ये बात बता दूं कि the taxes I pay from my domestic operation, which is retail, the 12% GST that I pay from retail is 5 times or 8 times the taxes that I pay from my export. I understand that exports are important because we need the dollars, and exports will go on the basis of, exports will go up on the basis of a long-term policy and also competitive tariffs and better working conditions, and as some people said, research and development, etc., etc. So the exports will go up and the dollars will come in. But if my domestic market, which suffers, the domestic manufacturing, which suffers from all the smuggled items that undersell me because they don't pay any taxes, actually my domestic operations pay many, many times the amount of taxes to the government that I pay from my exports. Why? Because I'm documented. So the domestic industry is just as important. And I would say that if we are going to give a competitive tariff, it should be across the industry, because we are paying taxes and we are also providing employment, much higher taxes. I think industry, both export and domestic, should go side by side. In any case, if we are exporting 80% of our production, it doesn't really matter. There is no subsidy involved, and yet there is much more tax involved. What the government should focus on is documenting the economy so that more people come into the tax net and they don't have to have misnomers like they are giving us a subsidy, which they are not. They are only giving us rightfully competitive energy prices. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you, Ahmed Zaman Saab. Thank you very much. Acha ji, if there's nobody else, Aqdas Afzal Saab, boliye.
जी सर, थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर दिस अपॉर्चुनिटी. मैंने एक दो बातें कहनी थी, बट अभी हामिद साहब ने जो कमेंट्स दिए हैं उसके बारे में आई जस्ट वांट टू से कि बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग और पर्टिनेंट कमेंट्स प्रेजेंटेड बाय द जेंटलमैन. क्योंकि ये कोविड-19 के आने की वजह से ना ये बेसिकली it's the beginning of the end of globalization. I mean, all big countries are going to start concentrating on narrowing down their global supply chains. और ये जो हमारे पास वेज कॉस्ट का एडवांटेज है, ये अगले तकरीबन 10 साल है. उसके बाद ये सारी मैन्युफैक्चरिंग या ये टेक्सटाइल प्रोडक्शन इज गोइंग टू स्टार्ट गोइंग टुवर्ड्स अफ्रीका. तो हमें एज अ टेक्सटाइल सेक्टर, एज एन इकोनॉमी, ये ज़रूरत है कि हम लोकल डिमांड को इंक्रीज करने की कोशिश करें, जिसके बारे में हामिद साहब ने भी बात की. तो आई जस्ट वांट टू echo and reiterate the fact that these are some very, very important comments just that were delivered by Hamid Saab. मेरा दूसरा point और आखिरी point वो ये है कि एक टेबल में in the study it was shown कि जो depreciation rates हैं वो पाकिस्तान में तकरीबन 11% हैं, इंडिया में 16% हैं, बांग्लादेश में 20% हैं, and this was part of the entire conversion cost. So conversion cost के तीन parts थे, energy, labor and depreciation. तो मेरा एक question ये है कि depreciations का rate different क्यों है different countries में? Does it indicate that they are investing more compared to us? Is that what it represents? And if that's the case, and I think that is the case, तो हमें ये देखना चाहिए कि हमारे जो competitors हैं वो अपनी competitive edge, technological investment और क्या कहते हैं basically उनका जो technological frontier है that is much क्या कहते हैं expanded compared to Pakistan. So I think that is where we should be focusing. और किसी ने यहाँ पे ये बात नहीं की कि हमारा जो अगर हमने productivity gains लेकर के आने हैं तो हमारा जो average worker है उसकी median school years या years of schooling कितने हैं? मतलब ये एक बहुत ही important issue है कि अगर आपकी population पढ़ी लिखी नहीं है, आपकी लेबर फोर्स पढ़ी लिखी नहीं है, तो आप उसको ट्रेन नहीं कर पाएंगे, वो मैनुअल्स नहीं पढ़ सकते, वो ट्रेनिंग कोर्सेज नहीं अटेंड कर सकते. तो आई थिंक ये एक आइडिया कि सिर्फ डिफरेंट सेक्टर्स पे फोकस करके पाकिस्तान समहाउ एक कंपैरेटिव इकोनॉमी दुनिया में बन जाएगा, ये नहीं होने का. ये एक सिस्टम्स थिंकिंग चाहिए जिसमें वेरियस इनपुट्स हैं इनटू द इकोनॉमिक प्रोडक्शन. उसमें मेरा ख्याल है सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट जो इनपुट है वो है आपका system of education. If you cannot compete in reading and math with the Finlands, Singapore's, South Korea's and Taiwan's, then forget about competing with them in terms of your exports. तो ये चीजें जो है ना हमारे पॉलिसी मेकर्स को देखनी भी हैं, हमें उनसे उम्मीदें भी हैं, और मैं ये विश करता हूँ, मेरी ये प्रेयर है कि ये इस सारे एंडेवर में कामयाब हों. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aqdas Saab. Khadija Bibi, would you like to say anything as closing remarks?
Thank you, sir. I just want to thank you for the opportunity, and I think all the comments that I have gotten from the experts are all very valuable. Although I still feel that majority of the discussions, whenever I have attended such meetings, I always feel that the focus is 90% on immediate relief measures and very little emphasis is given to medium and long-term policy making. I am not against immediate relief measures as mentioned by the stakeholders, but my focus, my emphasis is that whatever policies, we have to see the repercussions of those policies from a longer perspective. This is all that I wanted to say. Otherwise, it has been a very valuable discussion that we've had here, sir.
Thank you very much, folks. Razak, do you want to say any last words, or shall I just close the webinar? Razak Saab, Minister Saab, would you like to say any last words?
Razak Saab, kindly sir, अपने आप को unmute कर लें, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, we can hear.
Okay, I just want to say that it's been a very useful webinar. We have tremendous challenges in this in this textile industry. The whole cotton and textiles is a big challenge, but I am quite optimistic that inshallah with what has happened in the last few years, we will be able to move forward. So thanks to everybody. It's been a good learning experience also, and I will get the people together and to take this matter forward in Islamabad to quickly come to the conclusions that this report has clearly shown. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you very much, Razak Saab. In conclusion, all I'll say from PID side is that we welcome such opportunities. We'd like to work with all industries, all ministries. We've sent out letters and we've tried to contact everybody. I think it's a great opportunity. Pakistan think tanks and universities should be working directly with our policymakers, industries, Congress, parliamentarians, everybody. This is the nature of our work, and this is the reason for our existence. Quite frankly, I appreciate what Aqdas and Khadija have said, many people have said. We need to take a systemic view of things. We are operating like in a disaster movie. When a disaster strikes, at first pass, people are running around trying to fix a leak here, a leak there, a fire here, a fire there. It's crisis, crisis, crisis. So the first half hour of the, or maybe half of the movie, it's crisis, crisis, crisis. After that, somebody comes along and says, hey guys, let's sit down and plan a response. Then they take a systemic response. They look at the plans of the building or the city or whatever. They find out where the problems are. They approach it in a systemic fashion and solve the problem. I think it's time that a government started operating like that too. A government operates on a crisis basis. Here is a crisis, we go there, we solve it. I was 3 years in the government, I was sick of this crisis basis, and crises are mostly transaction. We need to get from transactions to policies. We need to get from partial analysis, fixing a leak here, fixing a leak there, to a systemic analysis. And I hope that our research community can back that up. So thank you very much, folks. It's been a wonderful webinar. I've enjoyed it enormously. I think we've learned a lot. We shall continue to reach out to everybody, to work together with everybody. Thank you very much, all. Khuda Hafiz. See you this evening. We got another one this evening on DFIs. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.